Good nomad scrambles here. We'll probably get some people trickling in, but in respect for those of you who showed up early, I'm going to start talking, and they'll just miss the glorious sound of my voice for a few minutes. I'll apologize for not standing right here, but if I stand right here, what happens is people get this perception that you're trapped in one location, and they see a stiff body that doesn't move, and they think, wow, this person is uncomfortable on this stage. And so what we do is we build schema, right? And schema are things in our head that tell us how to react in a given situation. And those are the schema that I'm going to talk about today. So one of the big questions that we always have in the security industry is, why do people make bad decisions? And apparently my Bluetooth keyboard decided to crap out right as I start forward. And the question really is, do people actually make bad decisions? Or do we just think that they're making bad decisions? Or do we not understand what their decision-making process is? I have a hard time believing that 99% of humanity makes bad decisions. I'm willing to believe that they make decisions that are suboptimal at a global scale, but that they think that locally are the right decision for them. Right? If those of you who read fantasy, Terry Goodkind calls this Wizard's first rule: people are stupid. Right? Because he believes that people just make bad decisions. We just don't understand their decision-making process. And so let's think about that. So the first thing we have to understand is that security people are in the business of helping people manage risk. And we often wonder, why do people make risky decisions? And the answer is, everybody lives in a state of risk. We accept risk all the time, right? People walked into this room and they didn't think about all of the ways in which this room could be hazardous to their health. We just sort of normally accept the fact that the room is dangerous. There's a door at your back. Strange things could happen there. You could be listening to a bad talk. You're risking some of your time. But what happens is we have this steady state amount of risk. And this steady state amount of risk that we have, as we're going along, sometimes something comes along that causes us to believe that our risk has increased. For instance, you might have an announcement at a conference that says, somebody last night was mugged on their way to the ATM around the corner from the conference. Everybody ever been to a conference or something that says that? Do you then say, oh, I need to be a little bit more careful? Now, it's not that your risk model changed. The world didn't change around you. Your perception of it changed. So what do? Maybe you make sure you go with a buddy to the ATM. Maybe you don't go to an ATM near a security conference. Whatever that's going to be, you're going to take some action to push your risk back down so that it comes back to where you thought you were before. This is known as the Peltzman effect. Sam Peltzman, an economist at the University of Chicago, said, look, if we mandate that everybody wears seatbelts, they will drive more dangerously and kill more pedestrians. Called the killer seatbelts rule. If you look at the NHTSA numbers, it looks like the number of traffic fatalities per 100,000 miles driven drops fairly consistently by a consistent rate every single year. It doesn't actually matter what the traffic laws are. It doesn't matter whether we make people have seatbelts on, whether it's a primary or a secondary ticketing offense. At the end of the day, they compensate for other risk. We thought we'd broken the Peltzman effect with bicycles. Bicycling is one of the most dangerous things that you can do. It's more dangerous than football, right? We pay all this attention on football and head injuries. Bicycling is more dangerous. And we put in place all of these helmet laws to stop people from doing dangerous things. And it looked for a minute like we'd broken the Peltzman effect, that we were actually able to drive down bicycle fatalities. It turns out that if you expand it to wheeled fatalities, all of the very dangerous bicyclists started riding things that were not bicycles. So the net rate of fatality and head injury has continued. Now this continues, people will work on this, but it also works in the other direction. That's the Peltzman effect. If you take away risk, we go get more. Right? And that's part of how the human brain operates. That's something we just have to be aware of, is that people are going to take risk. You're never going to get risk out of an organization or out of an individual. And a lot of the risk that people think about is what's known as historical paranoia. They're not actually paranoid about something that they themselves have experienced. They're paranoid about a story. There's an apocryphal research done with 5 monkeys. It was done in 1967. The original sources are a little bit sketchy. It's often told with monkeys and a banana. But it's monkeys and a novel object. If you take 5 monkeys and you put a novel object on a table, And when one monkey goes over to the object, you spray all 5 monkeys. Hose them down. And you do this until all 5 monkeys learn. Don't touch the object on the table. Take a monkey out, put a new monkey in. What does it do? It sees a novel object and it heads over for it. One of the other 4 monkeys will tackle it, restrain it, pull it away, and the other 3 monkeys are terrified. You can keep doing this, replacing out monkeys until you have 5 monkeys that have never been sprayed with water. And when you introduce a new monkey, do you know what they'll do? They'll tackle it. They don't know about the water, but they know that novel objects are bad. And this is what we teach people. It's historical paranoia. If you're a security professional in a large organization, and what people learn is that if I come and talk to you, you beat me up. If I come and talk to you, you beat me up. I don't want to come talk to you. And I will tell other people, don't come talk to you. Historical paranoia is how people operate. There's a schema in their head which says, when I talk to information security, it goes bad. Don't do that. But what's really happening in their head? What's really happening is we have 2 different systems in our brain. System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the fast lizard brain. Everybody here drives? Maybe not all of you drive. How many people have ever gotten in their car to drive home, gotten home, and realized that they did not remember their commute? Right? System 1 drove you home. It is an autonomous system. It's an expert system. It is really good at pattern matching. It takes inputs from the world. There's some neat research about how many things you can actually see in the world at any given time. You can only collect a small amount of data, and then System 1 applies pattern matches to it. System 1 is actually pretty stupid. All it can do is pattern match. What is 2 plus 2? 4. How many of you actually did math in your head? Almost none of you, right? That was System 1. It knows 2 plus 2 equals 4. What is 17 times 85? Right. If you want to solve that one, System 1 can't do it for most of you. There's probably a small handful that will say, oh, 17 times 85 is 17 squared times 5, and do the math that way. And System 1 can sometimes do that. You can train System 1, but what System 1 has is all of these rules, and it needs an output. Based on these rules, I do something. Sometimes that something is, I go call System 2, and I ask System 2 to solve this problem for me. System 1 is much like daemons that operate on a computer, right? Very lightweight, low CPU utilization, right? System 1 requires very little attention. It can operate autonomously, it can work on a lot of inputs, it can very quickly do things, and then very quickly say, yeah, you know, that's not very interesting anymore. It's a really cool system. System 1 is a bigot. You know how your parents told you don't judge a book by its cover? Yeah, that's because System 1 profiles. System 1 says things like, large man in a dark alley is bad. That's System 1. Right? System 1 is the system that tells you this thing, and 99.9% of the time, it's probably right. Or at least it's right enough to say, hey, you should pay a little bit extra attention here. That's all that System 1 does. Right? System 1 is the system that we interact with the world. It is our baser nature. It is our lizard brain. It is the thing that is afraid. Right? That's what motivates System 1 is fear. It's really good at negative emotions. It's really bad at positive emotions. Positive emotions tend to come out of System 2. Not always, but most of them do. So here's a fun little exercise. So I'm going to ask everybody to participate. I know nobody likes participating. This is really easy. You have one of 2 words to say. You're either going to say the word left or right. You see a line on the screen. Some words will appear either on the left side of the screen or the right side of the screen. And if it appears on the left, you say left. If it appears on the right, you say right. Everybody participates. I'm not dividing you in half. What I want you to pay attention to is, what is your attention cost? What does it cost your brain to say these words? Okay? It's really easy. Left or right? You all have that nice drone going on. I feel like I'm in the Apple 1984 commercial. Did that cost you a lot to say? No, it's really, really easy. Let's do it again. Ready? Notice how by the end of it was easy. It was much easier by the end. But we tricked you. System 1 wasn't looking at left or right, it was reading. We all read English really fast. In fact, it's easier for us to read the English than it is to discriminate between left and right. So that's what your brain did, is it said, I've got a System 1 template, this is great, and then I tricked the System 1 template. And then all of a sudden what happened was System 2 said, Andy's fucking with me, and I'm going to pay a little bit of extra attention here. And so all of a sudden you were consumed on that. And there were probably things that you would have noticed going on in the room that first time that you would not notice the second time, because you were spending more attention on what words you needed to say. Selective attention. If I have a developer who has to release software next week, all of their attention is on minimum capabilities to get their software out next week. They're not going to even notice other problems. If all of a sudden they're not commenting their code quite enough, or there's something that works but they're not quite sure how, sometimes they won't even notice that that's there. It's not that they're even making a conscious decision. They're actually just going to ignore it. And this is the story of the invisible police officer. About 15 years ago in Boston, a high-speed chase happens, and the vehicle that has the suspects in it, stops, crashes, and the suspects get out and they flee in 4 different directions. Suspect exits the rear right of the vehicle, African-American male, goes up and over a fence down an alleyway. First police officer to chase him, also an African-American male, plainclothes police officer, goes up the fence after him, is about 15 feet behind him. As he's about halfway up the fence, 4 people pull him down from behind, 4 police officers. They beat him within an inch of his life. And then one of them says, "Holy shit, this is a cop." And they run away. I leave him there. The police officer that apprehended the suspect was approximately 30 feet behind the suspect, went up over the same chain link fence. Moments after this happens, apprehends the suspect and brings them back. Under testimony, he says he saw nothing. It is quite possible he was lying. But he says, if something happened there, I absolutely would have seen it. Was he lying? Or did he actually not see it? It's very easy for us when we're looking for one thing, and we focus all of our attention on it, to not see something that everybody else would say, how can you miss this? There is a brutal beating happening within 3 feet of you, and you went past it. And he says, it couldn't have been there. I would have seen it. But we know from research that people miss obvious things like this. Right? Why do people run into bicyclists? Is it because they're mean, or because they don't expect to see a bicycle there and they're looking for cars? And so they have overridden System 1 and said, I'm making a right turn, look for a car, look for a pedestrian, and a bicyclist comes up. And it was neither a car nor a pedestrian. So their brain didn't see it. We do not know if that police officer was lying, has maintained his story for 15 years, that he never saw it, and if it was happening, he would have seen it. We tell ourselves lies. And they're not really lies, it's just what we perceive. Right? This is a terrible thing, because it means that we can't trust our own senses. The inputs that come into our brain, the world that we live in, is not necessarily the world that is actually happening around us. We make fun of all the Greek philosophers who talked about, well, if I'm in a dark cave and, Zeno says, if my senses are lying to me, maybe our senses really are lying to us. Maybe we don't really know what's happening in the world around us, and we have to pay extra special attention. And so this is the crux of it. When we are trying to work within our organization, we have to understand that they don't see the things that we see, because their brain is looking for something different. They're looking for performance bugs. We're looking for defects. We are looking for strange corner cases. They're looking for different strange corner cases. Right? This is sort of the crux of how the human brain operates. So do they just perceive that different world? Now here's what happens to us, right? So we get trapped. So System 1 has these schemata, right? The things that they're going to apply. And so we try to talk to people. So we come in and we say things like, don't use SHA-1 because it's broken. Oh wait, but don't use SHA-3 either because we think the NSA backdoored it. And while you're at it, don't use dual EC DBRG because that also sucks. And we start pontificating at things. Or we say, annual security awareness training. How many people work in an organization that does annual security awareness training? Yep, almost all of you, right? So we tell somebody, you have to come do annual security awareness training. And so we stand up and we lecture in a monotone like this, reading our slides. The purpose of this annual security awareness training is to ensure that you, our employees, are cognizant of the various policies and regulatory schema that we operate under. Yada, 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 right? And what do they hear? What they hear is, oh, right, this is another one of those annual awareness trainings, like my code of ethics training, my sexual harassment training, my diversity training, my manager training, my how to terminate people training, etc. I have to spend an hour sitting here. Let me read my email, or if you made me turn off all of my email devices, I will design code in my head. I have checked the box at the minimum amount of attention I can spend. This is how people get through security awareness training and everything else that we do that fits a standard template, because their brain has a schema. What do I do here? Right? When I started out, I could have been behind the podium. If I had stood like this the whole time and lectured at you, there's a schema in your head for people that do this. There's a different schema in your head for people that come out and talk like this. You think I'm a more animated and dynamic speaker. I actually am. But I'm also trying to make you think I am. Right? My content must be more engaging because I'm willing to come out here. I must be much more comfortable with it. Heck, this is the first time I've given this specific talk. I'm making it up as I go along. But if I stood back there, you would feel that. If I come out here, you don't. So our goal is, how do we break this cycle? So we have fun with this one, because we have to have annual security awareness training, because every freaking standard I have to deal with mandates it. So everybody gets a piece of email once a year. Automated email comes out from a database system, sends out to them and says, you're required to do your annual security awareness training. Please click here to do it. And it's not a CBT system. Our lawyers put out one for our code of ethics, and I overheard people talking about how fast they could get through the Flash-based CBT training. I think the best time was like 37 seconds. And I said, screw that. If you would like to cheat, I'm going to make it really easy. You click on the link, a page comes up, it has your name on it. It says, here's the reason why we do this. It has 4 or 5 paragraphs of text. And at the bottom it says, by clicking below, here's what you're acknowledging. You've received your training. You know where the policies are. It's 3 links in the page. Click accept. And it all fits on a standard desktop window. So if somebody wants to cheat and just click the link in their email and then click that, fine. You can take 3 seconds to do it. I don't give a damn. But we find that every year we get people who will send us detailed, critical feedback about the attached policies, that they went and they read 90-page policies and found esoteric typos in them that had survived for 10 years. I don't have to review my policies anymore. Other people are doing it for me. Or they say, this isn't the practice in my organization. Why is this in the policy? And we say, oh, really? That's interesting. Let's figure out which one of these 2 should change. And more often than not, we change the policy to match the practice. Quite often, the practice is better than what's in the policy. We wrote the policy 7 years ago. They've moved forward. They're doing better things, and they want us to reflect that in our policies. Right? We changed the schema on them. Instead of the schema being, InfoSec wants me to click slowly through this, it's we have said, this is not the most important part of our security awareness training. This is the compliance checkbox for our auditors. And if you have been here for 13 years, I don't probably expect you to spend an hour here. I expect you to spend 4 or 5 minutes. I have other security awareness training. I have some great things. We do this great social engineering training. It's wonderful. If you work for us and you have a publicly listed phone number, you're put onto a mailing list. You're welcome to join the mailing list. We have a lot of other people that join it. It's our social engineering alert mailing list. Because we get phone calls all the time. Some of it are from y'all, vendors, who call in and say, hey, I hear you're the director of IT, and they're talking to some help desk admin. And the guy goes, no, it's not me. He says, oh, could you give me the person who it is? No, click. Or, hi, this is Andy Ellis. I just landed in Louisville, and my phone died, and I've got to talk to Paul Sagan right now. Can you give me his cell phone number? You'd be amazed at how many times we get that phone call. A variant of that one happens all the time. And they're usually actually are using somebody's name who's actually traveling to a public event. They actually do just enough research that that person is probably not available right now. And so what do? The person says, thank you, I'm sorry, but you have an admin who's responsible for, taking care of that for you. Why don't you call them? And then they send email to the alert mailing list, and they CC anybody who was mentioned, and they say, hey, this is happening. Right? So when the person calls the next phone number, somebody's already sitting going, I know what this is. Right? So we are reminding people, we're building a schema in their head that if the phone rings and you don't know the voice on the other end, there's a very good chance it's an adversary. Be nice to them. You have the upper hand. It might also not be an adversary. It might actually be a customer or somebody who needs help. But be nice, but there's a limit to how helpful you're going to be. And it works wonders. Right? People actually respond. It was used the other day. We did a mass phishing attempt. Right? We had a pen test firm come in and said, okay, do a mass phishing attempt. They did a really good job, I actually have to say. Like, they actually sent mail from, and they sent the links to akarnai.com, because Akamai and Akarnai look identical on most browsers. And so this mailing list was used by the non-security professionals to reverse engineer the phishing attempt. Right? People said, hey, I just got this looks strange. Somebody else said, oh yeah, it does. Oh look, it's Akarnai. Let's see, oh wait, it's private registry. Let's go look at what host it resolves to. Let's see who owns the net block. Things which honestly security professionals don't bother doing anymore. Because the schema in our head is phishing doesn't matter. You can't go stop phishers, so why bother? But to a non-security person, they said, this is an adversary. Let me go learn. Let me go figure out what was happening. We had successfully trained them that they could disseminate information and it would help. And so they did. And it was vastly entertaining. And in fact, they kept trying to engage our enterprise security team who was running the test and saying, hey, it's okay, we got this covered, don't worry about it. And the users were getting frustrated. They're like, wait, we found a bad guy, this is somebody doing something. And then finally the user said, oh wait, the bad guy is a vendor. I bet our enterprise security team is behind this. Are you guys? At which point they said, yeah, it's us, okay. Right? But really great, we can change these schema, but it's slow. It's not fast. And what you have to do is recognize what are the schema that other people are putting out there. How many people try to tell users in their organization not to click links in email? How many people work in an organization where HR sends out links in email? Do you think you're going to win? The schema being set up is click links in email that come from the company. That's the problem. Right? You can't beat system one. You can manipulate it, but if it has schema, you're stuck with those until you can retrain them. But if somebody else is training them faster than you are, hey, here's your benefits. Click. Here's your paycheck. Click. And that's what adversaries are going to use. That's what they're going to attack. So how do we do this? Because what we have to remember is that the resource of the human brain is attention. This is what it is using. And so what we have to do is find ways to minimize attention with a productive output. That's what we often forget. System one doesn't deal well with things that are non-productive outputs. What it learns is throw this away. So if you have a way in which to engage that is not productive, then they say, sorry, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to hide it from you. I was talking with a buddy of mine who works at a financial services firm, and they had a data breach. Not a big one. It was about 150 of their users. And they looked at this and they said, if we tell information security and legal, oh my God, will that be painful? The law says we have to notify our user base, and they'll take care of it for us. But it's 150 people. We'll just call them ourselves. So what they had learned was that engaging the rest of the corporation was painful, and that if it was found out inside their corporation that they'd had this breach, it would be far more painful for them. So instead, they went and they notified all of the individuals personally. The application owner who'd had the data breach did notification because it was more important for them to hide it from their company, because engaging the company was non-productive. They had built a schema that said, if I do that, it will take a lot of my attention, less attention to go do this. So what do? We have to come up with ways to tell people, look, if you listen for this set of inputs, we have an easy thing for you to go do. So we have one. We say, look, if you have a data breach or a risk of credit card failure, call a person on the PCI SME list and they'll deal with it for you. Right? That's a nice lightweight one. We train that one into people. Right? And we make sure they say, oh, credit cards, PCI is scary. I don't want to deal with that. That's somebody else's problem. But whenever they see credit cards, they say to other people, you can't do that. That's over here. Right? We train them certain things you go avoid. And that's not okay if you want them to avoid it. Now, if you want them to learn, oh, if I have anything with possible person identifiable information, and I go talk to information security, they will kill my product. Well, then they learn, don't talk to information security. If instead they learn, oh, you're going to come help me, that's their goal. This is how System 1 operates, right? You've got to know, how do you program System 1? How do you get into its head? By giving it things to go do, not by scaring it. And so understand, what are the consequences of any given instruction that you give out to your organization? And what are their incentives? Right? Most people are not paid by not having a security vulnerability. Right? What do developers get paid by? Shipping code. The most important feature of any product is that it ships. And so that's their incentive. Make sure it ships. And so Schema 1 is driven for, how can I get things to ship? Otherwise, I should ignore them. So people don't have these appropriate rule sets. So how do we actually train them? This is actually the interesting thing. How do we teach System 1? And you can teach System 1 in a lot of different ways. Right? So one way that you can teach System 1 is by convincing people to actively engage System 2 for a while in a repetitive motion. It's why we all did mathematics drills. I started out with what is 2 plus 2, or what is 2 times 2. If I say, what is 7 times 7? Good, a few of you did it, right? That's because a lot of us did math drills when we were kids, right? We did 6 times 7 is 42, 7 times 7 is 49, 7 times 8 is 56. You do that often enough. When you're first doing it, you spend a lot of attention on the topic, and all of a sudden you discover it doesn't cost you anything. Muscle memory works with your brain too. System 1 takes over and says, right, let me just program that over here, and then you don't have to worry about it. Right? So you can actively train it, but you have to know what you're training. Or you can sort of subtly train it. Right? Use the same idea, but give it very small incentives. Every conference I go to, I give out candy for the people who show up on time. Not to everybody, sorry, I don't have quite that much candy. But in hopes that people will say, hey, I should show up to Andy's talks on time. Because, he tends to run them fast, he talks early, and he gives me candy. And it's some great stuff, right? Reward behavior, we are rhesus monkeys or dogs just like everybody else. We are animals. Our brains learn the same way that animals do. So I ran a little bit early, a lot early. I got about 20 minutes for questions, mostly because it's a novel concept. Question. Pardon? How speed reading works. I don't know. Quite possibly, right? Can you learn to recognize the patterns of words rather than just letters? Quite possibly, because it's how reading works, so I'd assume speed reading works in the same fashion. Any skill that is attention-based can be trained in this fashion, right? I know people who count cards this way, right? I can count cards with an awful lot of attention. You know that I'm counting cards. I know people who can do it without any attention because they practice the skill, right? So you can train this yourself. You can use this for self-improvement. One of the things that I left out here is, a lot of what we do is fundamental attribution error, right? We assert because somebody makes a decision that we don't like that they're a bad person, right? I'm willing to bet that all the people over there made decisions I don't like. They didn't come to my talk. Does that make them bad people? Yes. No. Doesn't make them bad people. But if I said to you, you're a bad person, do you want to listen to me anymore? Because how many people here think that they themselves are bad people? Okay, I know you're actually a bad person. The rest of you should go seek some therapy. But you're a Cowboys fan, so, you need help. Right? If I tell you you're a bad person, you don't want to listen to me. Right? So if I believe that you're a bad person, hiding that fact is a problem. I shouldn't believe you're a bad person. I should believe that you just live in a different universe than I do. And how can I figure out which one of us is wrong? Because maybe it's me. It might actually be that the Cowboys are an amazing team. I don't think so. But it might be. But how can I learn his pain? How can I empathize with the fact that Tony Romo is just good enough that they're never getting a decent draft pick? Right? You knew that was coming. Right? How can we empathize? How can we be nicer? And sometimes being nice, sarcasm helps, right? People enjoy commiserating with each other. But they really don't enjoy being berated. They don't enjoy when you say, I don't know why you're making such a foolish decision as to go ahead with Poly 1305 instead of, whatever other hashing algorithm could be. A, they don't give a damn, but B, why are you judging them? Empathize with them. Learn about the fact that they have an incentive which says if they don't do this thing, they get fired. Feel their pain. Do I do anything to protect myself from my own system one? I try. I try to look back and say, why did I behave badly? I do this when I drive a lot. When I drive, if I get angry at somebody else, first of all, I curse at them. Because I'm in my car, it's closed. It's a nice way to just get it out, unless my kids are in the car, in which case I have to be careful. And then I say, why did that bother me? And do I do that myself? Because it turns out that the behaviors that often really annoy us from other people are the behaviors that we do ourselves. And that it's just we don't like being on the other end of it. Right? I recently took up bicycling because my car got rear-ended, and it's a, electric vehicle that took a month to get the parts for it. So I had to ride my bike in and out of work. Man, are the drivers assholes in Massachusetts. They are so rude to bicyclists. And I'm riding my bike, and I'm like, well, now I know why bicyclists do the things that I think are stupid when I'm a driver. Completely different incentive. When you drive, how many people here optimize for safety? That when they're driving, it's all about safety. Oh, a couple people are yeah. How many people are optimizing for personal speed? How fast can I get there? Most of you. How many of you are optimizing for net number of vehicles through an intersection at any given time? Not very many. It's a couple people. I try to do that. That's a fun one to try to do. How many of you are optimized for conservation of momentum? Right? Yeah, a bunch of you, everybody who drives a hybrid or electric vehicle is certainly in that category. Bicyclists are all about that. If I'm a bicyclist, the last thing I want to do is stop. I'm up to like 16 miles an hour. That was really hard. And I'm about to go up a hill. I do not want to stop for that stop sign. So I'm going to look to make sure that it's safe and go right through. And the car who's sitting there is like, fuck you, bicyclist. Can't you stop? No, that hurts. Right? So I try to do that. That's how I protect myself against my system one, is I say, why do I think this? Why am I reacting this way? And am I perfect? Absolutely not. Part of the problem is, while I've been here, system one has been making decision after decision after decision. Right? All of the people who got up when the slides ended, right, my brain judged. It said, wait, there's still a talk going on. Now it's just interactive. Right? I want to see what people thought was interesting, and so that we can dive in. And people got up, and my brain judged them. And then I'm going to say, no. I shouldn't really judge them. They don't know how I give a talk. To them, they're used to, this is the point when the dumb question comes up and somebody, only answers the question and doesn't riff off of it. And so they're not used to that, maybe. Or maybe it was somebody who really had to go to the bathroom because he ate something bad at lunch. I don't know why, but I shouldn't judge. The rest of you all stayed. That's great. Let's keep having a conversation. I'll keep giving you hell about the Cowboys. The best thing I can say about the Cowboys is they're in the NFC East, so they don't suck that much comparatively. Cognitive blindness. So there's actually several things that are cognitive blindness, which is, did you see it? Did you not pay attention to it? So there's a bunch of different things that sort of come under that. There's a really great book here called The Invisible Gorilla that I strongly recommend. In fact, it was live tweeted out during this for those of you that were following me. For those of you that were not, you can follow me, and for the last hour, I've been tweeting out a whole bunch of reference links for folks. But if you go to Google and you do the monkey business, YouTube, it's the monkey business illusion, right? People, if I tell you to focus on something, you're just blind to certain other things sometimes. Right? And sometimes it's not that your eye doesn't focus on it. There's been some really great studies done where you can see people and you say, did you see this? No. But I was watching your eye, and your eye focused on the object. It was not a physical blindness. This is a mental one. There are actual places where your brain won't let you focus on something. Slightly different one. If you're interested in that, I think probably the place to start is The Invisible Gorilla. Is a great book to start from. More questions? Yes. My background. My background is a little bit of everything. So I went to MIT. I studied theoretical computer science, which is the discipline that suggests that one day we will build computers. And if so, we might be able to compute some problems with them, but not others. Then I did information warfare for the United States Air Force. And then I came to Akamai. So I've been here for 13 years. In between that, I hold an Award of Excellence from the Wine Spectator for running a wine cellar. I have the Spirit of Disneyland Award for excellent customer service. And I've received a couple of accolades here. So I'm sort of a polymath. I love lots of stuff. I have no cognitive science background. I went and said, was a big fan of the economics. I love game theory. I said, why do people make decisions like this? Let's go look at it. And I would suggest to anybody who goes and reads any cognitive science paper, take with a grain of salt any research study. This is my favorite one. Everybody here is familiar with the prisoner's dilemma. If you're not, can you raise your hand so I can spend 30? Okay, the prisoner's dilemma is a study in which I take two people, you two, right? And I'm going to pretend they're prisoners. And I'm going to say to each of them, I separate them, and I say, look, I know that you have committed a crime. In fact, I know you committed a big crime, and I have evidence on a little crime. So here is your choice. You can confess and give me the evidence I need on your companion. And if you confess and they don't, then I'm going to cut a deal with you where you're going to go to jail for a year for the lesser crime, and then you go free, and they're going to jail for 10 years. Right? And if you don't confess, and they do, the flip side happens. Now, if neither one of you confesses, I can get you on that lesser crime, but I'm going to make sure you're each in jail for 3 years. And if you both confess, well, I think you're both going to be in jail probably for about 7 years, right? Because they'll take some leniency on you. So it turns out that you should both confess. It's obviously the right strategy in a two-player game. It's a very important piece of it. And it turns out that when you do studies like this, often with rewards instead, with graduate students in the discipline of cognitive science, which is who all of the studies are done on, that they will only cooperate with each other, that is not confess, about 35% of the time. 65% of the time, they're going to rat each other out. So we have learned that people rat each other out 65% of the time. Nope. If you take this study, and in Australia, somebody just said, well, this is dumb. It's the prisoner's dilemma. We've always tested on grad students. Why don't we run it on prisoners? So they went into the Australian penal system, and they said, look, we'll give you cigarettes as going to be the reward. And it turns out the number is completely flipped. 65% of the time, these two people said, this is not a two-player game. This is a three-player game. The researcher is a player in the game. How do I screw him? Oh, I screw him by not ratting out my buddy, and we get more cigarettes that way. Right? In fact, there's a game in the UK called Golden Balls that effectively does Prisoner's Dilemma, and at the very end, two players are up against each other, and there's like 10,000 pounds at stake, and they each have to pick steal or share. And if you both pick steal, neither of you gets the money. If one of you picks steal, you get the money. And if both of you pick share, you split the money. Right? And the classic YouTube video of this is a guy who basically, at the very beginning, picks his ball, sets it up, and says to the other person, I have picked steal, and I will share with you. And every time the other person opens up and says, I have picked steal, and I will share with you. Keeps doing this. The other person is just like, what the heck? They've got like 2 minutes to negotiate. And the other person, this guy's not negotiating. And so they're like, fine, whatever, I'll put share. Maybe the guy's honest. Well, the guy who said, I'm going to pick steal, I'm going to share with you, had picked share. Because and when he said, why did you do this? He said, you weren't going to keep the money. We're taking it away from you. Either we're sharing it or he's getting it. But if I don't get any money, I don't want the show to keep any either. So if you go do studies in cognitive science, pay attention to the fact that the studies all assume two-player games, and rational actors understand that this is a three-player game. The government or whoever is running the study is one of the players in the game. More questions? So how much of a hindrance to adaptation is System 1? I think it's a huge hindrance to adaptation. Right? System 1 is very comfortable. And System 1, if it has a schema, is going to continue to apply it. So what you have to do is figure out why is it applying the schema and come up with ways to either break that schema or provide a better schema for it. Right? Humans aren't going to keep making dumb mistakes. Right? If you walk down an alleyway and you say, I'm only going to be scared of large males in this alleyway, and short females start kicking your ass. At some point, System 1 is going to say, right, alleyways are the bad problem, not the large males in the alleyway. Now, if every time you go down it's only large males that kick your ass, then Schema 1 is going to stick on that large male is the problem in System in there. Now, part of the problem is availability bias. What evidence is available to us? Right? How many people have kids in here? Right. How many of you think ever about abduction with your children? How many of you worry about stranger abduction? Right? Stranger abduction is amazingly rare, but it's what gets advertised. It's what our brains hear. So System 1 has programmed us to be careful about strangers. If I walk onto a playground that my children are already there, every head turns and looks at me. Because I'm a stranger, I might be abducting their child. Most children that are abducted by family members. But we don't talk about those. Those don't get widely publicized. And why would we panic about our family members? It's still a very rare occasion. But availability bias programs System 1, and so it gets in our way. We make bad decisions about risk all the time. Again, bad decisions, because what is available to us suggests risks that are not necessarily in line with the real risks in the universe. Absolutely. So the question is, are you being programmed by the media? That's very crisp and concise and very accurate. What you see on the news programs you. Right? If you see the news telling you that, such and such a group is bad over and over again, then you're going to believe such and such a group is bad. If you follow people on Twitter and you only follow people on one side of the spectrum or the other, and so they only tell you about the ills of the other side, then you're going to believe the other side is evil. Because that's what's available to you. And so you'll have this bias in your head which says, oh, right, somebody like this behaves like that. And you'll be predisposed to believe that Fox News or MSNBC isn't really a news channel and that they're really just biased and in the tank for one party or the other, but you don't necessarily believe that about the other one. Because that's what's available to you. And that's a simplification. But absolutely, the news that is available to you, the information available to us, is what programs us. Yep. Oh, in terms of with with kids doing it? Oh, absolutely, right? So we have schema for how to deal with other people who are fighting, right? If these two people are fighting, right, our schema often says, oh, both of them are to blame, and sometimes it's only one, sometimes it's the other one, we don't necessarily know, but we don't want to get involved. right? We have a model which says the way to succeed when there is somebody else at conflict is to be above the fray, is to mellow them out. So we certainly have some schema there that we get taught as parents, as children, in schools about how to resolve problems. And if it's effective 90% of the time, then of course we're going to keep doing that. And so you should look for these patterns in your organization. Look for how people react to common situations. Best piece of advice ever given to me by my boss. One day he says to me, we just come out of an executive briefing in which I had stuck my foot in my mouth at least 3 or 4 times. I'm not always this suave. And he says to me, he says, Andy, what were you trying to achieve? I said, well, I was trying to educate about this. He says, no. What were you trying to achieve? How did you want to change the room? What was the purpose of opening your mouth? And I realized that I didn't know. The purpose of opening my mouth was to speak. Right? That should never be your purpose. Our goal is not to speak. Our goal is to change the world. How do we want to change the world every time we're here? How I want to change the world with this talk is I want each of you to walk out of here and think about this and say, how can I be a better information security professional? How can I interact with the people around me to make people take better risks? Not fewer, better. Right? How can I interact with people in a way that makes them respect the security profession? How can I be such an amazing person that Andy wants to come hire me into his organization the next time that there's spots? Absolutely, when we're hiring, we're out scrounging for people who understand this, who grasp that we are part of an organization of humans. And those humans care. They have different motives than we do. But at the end of the day, we all want sort of the same thing. We want to take really good risks to go make a lot of money. At least we do. We're a publicly traded company, so I'm supposed to say that. Okay, I think I got time for one more question. Yes, I love the hat. So what are the most common cognitive biases? So actually what I find is one of the biggest cognitive biases that we run into is people who believe in logical fallacies. Right? We have folks who have like these massive lists of all of the possible logical fallacies there are. And the thing about logical fallacies is what they are is correct logic misapplied. Right? The slippery slope argument is true. Right? If you do one bad thing and you get away with it, you're going to do another bad thing, and then you're going to do another bad thing, and then you're going to do another bad thing. Now, one problem is people say, oh, that's a logical fallacy, I won't listen. First, my most common bias is people who ascribe legitimate arguments to be logical fallacies. Probably, though, the biggest one is availability bias and confirmation bias, those two, right? What evidence is available to you modifies your decision, and evidence that confirms your beliefs in the world are probably 2 of the biggest ones. So that's what I generally see as the biggest cognitive biases that people will have. The fallacy. I like that. Okay, so that's the end of it. I would appreciate if you guys would applaud more loudly than that group just did so that they can all be depressed that they weren't in this talk. Thank you very much.